to it in a minute. I just gonna get confirmation from my team that we're actually live. Y'all know how the technical aspects of it work. And we will know in a minute. So, what kind of coffee are you drinking today, Seth? Let's start there.
I'm a tea drinker actually, so I'm drinking just a English breakfast tea. That's sort of my go-to in the morning.
I'm gonna have to do like a meeting where we gather all of our coaches from coffee and coaching, because
Yeah,
I genuinely believe we have half tea drinkers and half coffee drinkers.
yeah, may need to be coffee, tea, and coaching. I don't know about
Completely messed the name up because there's two
taking over.
C's. That's
Yeah,
all I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah. That'll throw everything off. But
Throw my entire OCD off
yeah,
the
yeah,
window here,
yeah.
so that's awesome. Well, we are live and our team has confirmed, and I am so super excited to have Seth Frey here with us. And he is more than just an amazing coach and friend of mine that we have had such amazing conversations about everything, life, business, corporate. But I do have to say, Seth, that you have been also like a Gandalf in my life when it comes to communication. So have to say that.
You're so kind. You're so kind.
You're one of the experts here, but I do want to talk a little bit about you without making you blush. But Seth Frey is a communication expert and educator and a consultant. Seth's work focuses on organizational success, and especially when we talk about the way employees communicate. And I'm in the midst of, as you know, Seth, writing my first leadership book. And I talk a lot about how communications can break or kill your career path
Hmm.
if you're not prepared to handle some of the tough conversations and also manage our emotions,
Yeah.
when at work.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. One of the courses that I've taught before at the university that I work at, we've taught a course on leadership and communication and you put them both in the title of the course because I really think that they go hand in hand. I don't think you can be an effective leader without being an effective communicator.
A hundred percent.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
really do go hand in hand.
Yeah. I have I don't think I can say like every great leader I have in mind, which I'm actually in communication with them right now because they're helping giving us some testimonies for the book. It's a lot of them are amazing communicators, and even one of them, who's like someone I admire, I met him through him giving me tough feedback and telling me like basically you're messing up, but he did it in a way that stayed with me, in a way that I changed what I was doing. I changed who I was, and he became one of my best friends and mentors for the rest of my life. But the way he said that feedback could have set me up for complete breakdown, disengagement, and just leave and never ever again work.
Yeah, yeah.
But he did it in a way that it made me feel the weight of the responsibility that I carry in that interaction, and it just changed my career forever. So
Yeah, and I think that says something too about how you communicate a message. We talk about this all the time when I'm either coaching clients or working with students. It's all about about how you say it, right? You can use the same exact words multiple different ways, and they can mean multiple different things. And he shared that message in a way that was empowering, and it lifted you up, and it sort of prodded you on. It sounds like, but you're right. It could have torn you down if he said it in a slightly different way.
it sure did. Let's go right into it because this is a crucial part. We are experiencing burnouts in employees, professionals, just humans living today in an all-time high. So when professionals are under stress, in your professional opinion, how does their communication typically change?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think a number of things come to mind. I think one of them is communication may start to become more rushed.
Mm,
I think we start to, rush through messages. We maybe spend a little bit less time focused on how we send that message. Like we just mentioned, if you're really intentional about how you send the message and the way that you want it to come across to the receiver, it's probably going to be more effective. But when we start to when we come under more stress, um, there's that chance that we're not going to be as focused in on how we're sending the message. There's going to be a chance that we're not as tuned into the audience, the person on the other side. We may not be thinking about them quite as much if we're under stress, or we're trying to whether it's stress related to hitting a deadline or stress related to just larger, burnout and workplace stress, I think we tend to focus a little bit more inward when we get to those moments, those
Yes.
stressful moments, as opposed to focusing outward. And I really think that when we talk about effective communication, it's focused on the audience, it's focused on the other person more so than it's focused on you. But I think stress really flips that script, and we start to focus inward a lot more.
I love that you said that because we just went through a training with some leaders here in the Maryland area, about 30 leaders, PG Parks, which is an amazing organization I actually
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed working with. And we talked about effective communication. We had this leader that she was talking about. I send the same email every month, and I don't know why this person that is receiving this email is not reading it.
Mm.
And shout out to her. If she's listening to this, she's like, Carol, you brought it up on the podcast. But I had to bring it up because I asked her, do you believe you're communicating effectively? And her answer was like, yeah, I'm sending the same email every month.
Mm.
And the question was on effective communication, what leads me to your question, because I think effective communication means different things for different people.
Mm-hmm.
I asked her, do you believe you're communicating effectively? And she said yes. And I said, is what you need to get done getting done? And she said no. And I'm like, then it's not effective communication.
Mm-hmm.
Effective communication is more about the receiver, the way the person wants to receive that information in order for you at work to be able to get the thing that you're trying to get done.
Exactly.
And it completely changed her perspective. So what is effective communication to you?
Yeah, I think effective communication to me is when the message sent by you as the sender is the same as the message received. They're equal. I mean, if you think about it almost as an equation, right? If what you are sending and what you're trying to send is received by that receiver, by that listener, in the way that you intend, that to me is effective. We've effectively communicated to them. And sometimes we need to do that there's all sorts of different ways. We can vary our tone, we can vary the urgency, we can vary a lot of different factors in it. But ultimately, I think it comes down to that. There has to be parity between what you're sending and what they're receiving. Because if we think of it as an equation and that's not equal between the two, that becomes then, of course, ineffective communication.
Yes.
I think very simply, that's what it comes down to for me.
I love that, and I have to say, like for me, I think that's a great equation. If what you're saying and what is being received is not the same, then as the sender, it's your responsibility to ask again, like, "Hey, did that land? What did you understand for what I said? Did your and we do disc models here a lot, so I'm a D, which
Mm-hmm.
you probably know already.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's not a lot of sugar coating involved, and I think that's what we're friends because you
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
you receive it very well. But like, it took me a long time to not, just I realize some people need a little bit more cushiony
Mm-hmm.
before I say something. And also sometimes a smile goes a long way. Like if I, when you're like saying something like this versus when you're like smiling, like I said this to a client and I wanted to check with you on your coaching, how you do this. But I say a lot that 90% of communication happens before you even open your mouth, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of what you're saying physically with your message that could impact the receiver.
Yeah, I think the official number I've heard on it is 93% is
Oh,
nonverbal
there you go.
communication. So you're
I'm
right.
right.
You're right on, Carol. You had that stat down.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I think it's 93% of what you say is through facial expressions, through tone. It's not actually the words that you're using, but it's how you're using them. That 93%
And
is yeah.
there's a book called This How You Say It. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
whoever came up with that book title is a genius because it's like it's how you say it is such an important piece. So
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about misunderstandings, intention. What happens a lot when stakes are high, burnout is high, we are worn out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you believe that an environment can affect your communication style? Where you're in can
Hmm.
affect your communication style, or it's all internal?
Oh, I think the environment absolutely plays a role in what you're communicating and how you're communicating. And I think as you're developing a message, you want to be thinking about that environment that it's going to be most effective. Going back to what we just talked about, an effective message has to be the same between the sender and the receiver. Thinking about a lot of environmental factors, I think when we think about stress and tension and some challenges between maybe the person sending and receiving a message, I think we need to consider when's the best time to communicate that message. I think there's certain messages that at work that it might be better to communicate that in the morning or earlier on in the week. You even think about the flow of your week. I mean, you don't want to communicate your most important message at 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. That's not going to
Nope.
land,
It's not,
right? So
we are gone. People
no,
are
we're out.
gone.
We're checked out. We're done. But if you send that same message that's important at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning or Tuesday morning, there's going to be a lot more reception to it. So I think about a number of things in terms of those external factors. I always encourage people too to think about what's the best medium that we for the
Mhm.
particular message that we're sending. I think we have so many tools. We have more tools today available to send a message than we've ever had before. And I think we want to take advantage of those tools, but we also don't want to rely too heavily on the tool as the form. I don't want to get into the point where it's every message has to be sent in this form because this is the only thing that we use at work. Well, maybe there is some time that a face-to-face message going up a floor or two and talking to your colleague is going to be more effective than sending them that quick Teams or Slack message. I think so when we go back to your first question about tension here, it's all these factors and it's putting all of these factors into play. And I think that you're not going to be perfect the first time. You're not going to land the plane exactly the way you want it every time, but that's where you keep learning. And that, I think the beauty of communication is it's a continual learning process. It's not
Yeah.
something that it's a one and done. I'm learning that I learn every single day. And try to become a little bit better every single day in what I'm doing. And by no means am I perfect, but I think that's always my goal, is to try to continue to polish up in one area and be a little more focused or tuned into one area, to try to be a little bit better in the way that I communicate.
I love that. And I think like I do relate communication to leadership and to parenting. And I
Hmm.
want to encourage anybody that has a question, please feel free to put your question in the comments because Seth and I will answer at the end of this live. But I think parenting, leadership, and communication is one of those things that you can never get. You can never stop upgrading. You can never stop becoming better and being better and striving for being better. There's not a point where you're like, um, there's a video game called Sims, and
Hmm.
I'm an avid
Hmm.
Sims player forever.
Hmm.
And I have this thing where it's like you reach level 10 of parenting, you can actually learn the parenting skill. There's never a level 10 in parenting. There's never
Hmm.
level 10 in leadership. There's never a
Yeah.
level 10 in communication.
Hmm.
Like you constantly continue to get better because your brain constantly continuously evolves and changes, and
Hmm.
you need to learn how to communicate in how do you present yourself in that way. And I think that that's very important. I do want to talk a little bit about that tension and some of the methods that we use, HK method, where we talk about pause and release.
Hmm.
And when, especially for me, like I did the Daniel Goldman's emotional intelligence assessment like 15 years ago. My social regulation, my social awareness, and my self awareness was really high. My self regulation was like 55. I'm like I know that when I took this assessment, someone was like, "What is happening?" And I had a leader, um, Dan Gonzalez, actually, that said to me once, if what everyone says can create a reaction out of you, the reaction that they want, then anyone can control you.
Hmm.
And I think that was so powerful because it changed my a bit my response and what I was feeling in the moment. So when I receive a message, which this happens to a lot of people in corporate, not the way that you expect to receive it, I still can choose how I react.
Hmm.
I still can choose how I respond. And as the receiver, I can also change the way the information is being delivered.
Hmm.
So I wanted to ask you about your perception of on that power that the receiver had, because a lot of people believe that only the sender has the power to change the conversation. So I want your take on what power does the receiver have?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think about the that receiver there. There's what we call the feedback loop, and that, we've been talking about communication almost being one way to this point, but there is a lot of feedback that happens from that receiver. It's feedback in terms of how they're responding with their nonverbals. We talked about nonverbal communication earlier. Their nonverbal response in the moment as you're sharing information with them, that's giving information back to the receiver, or sorry, the sender, real time, immediately.
Yes.
They're getting that information back, and I think that you, as someone who's receiving information, you absolutely have power. There's some control that you've got over the there's some control that you may have over your facial expressions, but there's some facial expressions that just come out without having, you really, they're those micro expressions that you sometimes will make without even really thinking about it. So I think as the receiver, you definitely have some control over an aspect of your nonverbals, and then of course you have an aspect over how you respond and what you say, and you can a lot of times choose to take a conversation in multiple directions based on your response. So I agree with you that, a lot of times we talk about the power being in the sender of the communication, the person that's
Yeah.
initiating that message. But
And there's more. Yeah.
yeah, I think there is there is power in your response, and you can choose how to respond. I think, you bring up parenting, and I've got a few kids as well, and this is something we've talked about, you and I, is there's power in how you respond to your kids. There's multiple ways that you could respond to them when they ask for something, or when they're, when something's going wrong. And I think that's a very tangible practice of that, is thinking about, yeah, I could respond this way, I could respond this way, I could respond this way, and then what's the reaction that I'll get based on that response. So it's always thinking sort of the next step ahead to see, all right, what's the response going to be if I choose to respond in this way. And I think the same thing's true
Yes.
in work and life. We see it in all of our interactions, and in all our communication interactions.
And we're gonna have an episode with Mindy, our parenting coach, and we're gonna talk a lot about communication. I will tell you, as a mom, like my kids are constant work for me on communication. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, especially when you're negotiating with a 3-year-old,
Oh
like
yeah.
things become like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, and it just is, and especially when you're at the point where you're the most exhausted at the end of the day. You came home, you've been talking to
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
you're a parent, you have all this stuff. So with that, I want to ask you a question about, some of the practical ways professionals can improve their communication and while staying intentional.
I think that's great. I think the number one thing, and really for me, the central message that I share when I'm talking with students, people that I'm coaching that are in business, people that have been in business for a few years, or people that are 30 years into their career, the number one thing is focus on that audience, focus on that other person. And this applies whether you're talking about a one-on-one interaction, whether you're talking about a small group interaction, or you're talking about a larger presentation that you're giving in front of a larger audience. It's thinking about who are those people that are going to, or who is that person or people that are going to be receiving that message, and how can I best uh, mold and shape both the words and how I use those words to be effective in communicating what I want to share with them. So it all comes down to the audience. And specifically, if we're talking about, say, a more formal presentation or something that you're asked to put together, start with that audience. I always tell those that I coach, I say, you create a document. If you're asked to give a presentation, where at the very top you define who is that audience, who is it that I am speaking to. Spend 3 or 4 minutes just writing out, what do I know about them? Maybe it's not very much, and maybe I need to do a little research, or maybe it's quite a bit, and I think, okay, I'm going to have this type of person in the audience, or this group of people. And if it becomes a really large audience, focus on those key decision holders, those key decision makers that are within the audience, so you can identify and clarify who those people are. So that's really the first thing that I always start with. And then the second thing in that document is I say, put down your objective. What do you want the audience to get out of that interaction, that presentation? At the end of the presentation, if the audience understands, knows, can demonstrate X, what is it that's going to make it successful? So I always think that's really helpful on the more polished, not polished, but the more prepared presentations for larger groups. But I think the same applies when you're in those more informal settings, is just keeping that individual in mind, in terms of how are they going to respond? What is my past history with that person, so that I can hopefully shape a message that I think is going to be to resonate most with them, and they'll most likely understand. So I really think it all comes down to that audience as the top tip. But then, there's a few other pieces that go out from that. I think it's thinking about tone and nonverbal communication and your nonverbal messages. It's thinking about, do I have the right words? Have I put the right words together that are going to be effective for this audience? I know you said you're working on a book right now, and I think that's part of the challenge there. Is your audience could be really broad. So how do you
Yes.
find words that are going to hopefully speak to that maybe broader audience than if you were speaking one-on-one with a person? Because sometimes you don't necessarily know that audience when you're
Yeah.
writing a book. So anyway, just a couple thoughts there. It all comes down to the audience. So that would be my one takeaway from this. If you had one thing, is how can you better consider the audience in those messages that you're sending?
I love that audience mapping exercise, and especially because we talk about the medium matters where you do it. When I'm coaching a client, I'm always like, "Do you have to say it in a live meeting? Is this a conversation that will happen in front of 10 other people, or is this a one-on-one conversation?" And most of the time, it's a one-on-one conversation. I think technology has also messed us up a little bit because we typically we typically are used to just sending a message in teams, and like my husband, he's really good like in person, and I'm an introvert by nature, he's not. So I'm like, I was about to send a message of something that was crucial, and I'm like immediately going to text the person,
Mm-hmm.
and he will stop me and say, "Hey, that's a phone call."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
As an introvert, I'm like, I'm gonna have to get. Now, if they ask me, you want to get on with Seth on the phone? I'm like, yeah, call Seth, right? Like, it's like it
Yeah.
changes drastically, you know. So, like for me, it's something that I constantly ask. Is like the medium, and then when you talk about the audience mapping, I think it's so important. I love that you talk about the history with that person,
Mm.
especially when we are in the times that we are in, and a lot of people are being asked to get back into the office, and there's some history sometimes that you have with a particular person, but I will tell you this, very few times someone genuinely wants to not do the best thing for the company or the best thing for the job that you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would say very unlikely.
Yeah.
So sometimes when we take ourselves out of the equation and we make it about the work, we make it about the business, it's important also for people to get to know where you're coming from and what you're trying to do. And if there's some relation that needs to be amended in order for the communication to be better,
Mm-hmm.
separate the business from that situation and make sure that you are connecting with that person offline, not necessarily just at work. It could be a coffee, it could be a lunch. And if you're not there yet, even a quick one-on-one where you decide. There's been times where I do remember in my corporate career where like, look, we're different people. We don't like the way we work, but this still needs to get done. So let's remove this, right? I'm typically a fast worker. Someone else is a very detail oriented worker. And that's what we teach is like, hey, I need you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I am too fast working. You're very detail oriented, and I need what you bring to the table. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about anything else other than that. And I think that just drives a different conversation. I do want to bring something up that
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you I was going to do it, but you have been one of the most instrumental coaches in my professional career because I remember when I was doing the communication coaching, I used to believe, and I received this feedback from a leader that was not very nice, but they were like, your accent will get in the way of
Mm-hmm.
you continuously growing in your career.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, I was born in Dominican Republic, raised in Puerto
Mm-hmm.
Rico. I speak more like Bad Bunny than probably,
Mm-hmm.
anybody else in the work environment. I understood the whole Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But I want to say you were one of the coaches that when I came to you to help with how I communicate and I talked to you about my accent, do you remember what you said to me?
I would guess this was a little while ago, but I would guess that I probably said something along the lines of, I want you to be your, who you feel comfortable being at work. I don't think that you need to make a major shift in one direction. I do think, again, we're thinking about the audience, we're thinking about the people that we're interacting with, and there might be some slight adjustments that you can make. I know when I communicate with people that have different backgrounds or different accents, or English isn't their first language, there might be some slight modifications I'll make to the way that I speak with them. But I also don't want it to come across in a demeaning way, like I'm sort of lowering my speed to a place that's much slower than it has to be. But I
Yeah.
will make some slight modifications. That would be my guess of what I said. But what did I actually say?
You it's so funny because you were one you basically said to me, I have no problem understanding you and I understand you just fine.
Yeah.
So that like remove that. And then you made it about you adjusting the way you listen to me, and you made it about the way you speak in order for as someone with a second language. And
Hmm.
for the first time I realized in that moment that my communication was as much about the receiver as me.
Mm.
And from that moment on, I don't think you did this on purpose. And I say this to anybody that has English as second language in a place like America that
Yeah.
is so diverse. I say what I'm going to say. And if the person doesn't understand it, they can stop me and then interrupt me and I'll say it again differently. But
Yeah.
in that moment, I completely empower myself to just say it the way I mean to say it. And you also made it seem like I don't want you to have to show up as not authentically yourself. And I think your accent's pretty cool, right?
Hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, it is like, and I want to say that because sometimes we believe communication has to be the has to be so diminished to the point that we become corporate people. I still have an accent. I'm still a
Hmm.
professional. I still show up as my authentic self. And my directness had nothing to do with my accent, right? I
Hmm.
can still use
Hmm.
my accent. But
Hmm.
93%, oh no, I know it's 93,
Yeah. Yeah.
93% of my communications what is nonverbal. And I make sure that whatever I say, I do it in an inviting way
Hmm.
to allow that. But I want to give you kudos because this is how true leaders show up and true coaches show up for people and change their lives in a positive manner, because I was out here trying to become something that I was not, and you encouraged me to no, there is a way to do it, and you don't have to eliminate so much of yourself in order to do that. So,
Yeah.
you know, you're an amazing human. That's what we're
Oh
friends.
my
But
gosh.
that moment was so important in my career, in my life. And now I have a podcast where everybody can hear my accent. So you know that it was
Yes.
a
I
positive
love it. I love it.
positive
No, and
impact.
I think you're exactly right, and so it's good. I remembered it about in the same way that I shared it, so that's a good thing. But I think too, it's yeah, you don't need to make a major adjustment, but also like we talked about, be paying attention to that other person. If you notice some of those cues that like maybe they're not understanding me, maybe I'm speaking too fast, maybe I'm
Mhm.
speaking. Maybe my accent is a little bit harder for them to understand. You see some of those cues of maybe confusion or misunderstanding. Um, or you ask a follow-up question, you say, is that making sense to you, is there any questions that you've got about that, and they do have some follow-up questions. I think that gives you a little cue on, all right, maybe I can make a slight adjustment for this particular person. So I think that's what exactly what it comes down to is I think no need to make a major adjustment, but be paying attention for some of those cues as well, and then hopefully on the listening end, the receiver end, if you aren't understanding something, ask about it and have an open conversation about that as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And like for me, at least I'll tell you, I think these are important. And I talk a little bit about the pause and release method, and I want to talk a little because I didn't go deep into it. But pause and release is basically taking a pause on an interaction or something that happened, figuring out how it triggered you, if it did, and taking a pause, which means don't send the email, wait till the next day.
Mm,
Or in that moment, you can say, hey, I'm still processing that information. Can I get back to you?
mm,
Or it's just taking a minute to being like, yeah, okay, let's reconnect on that, to allow yourself to regulate and then figure out what is the feeling that is coming up for you right in the middle of that pause of, am I feeling what kind of feelings I'm bringing, and then you trying to figure out the root cause. And the
mm,
release is just you going. I mean, for me, I do look at comedy because laughter is the best brain to hack your brain. I'm like, I look into comedy, I talk to someone I love. I don't vent at work. I vent with my friends outside of work. And like, it just allows me to kind of recenter myself before I go back. And then I recenter that into what's the work? What's the work that is kind of come out of of this, not what happened in that interaction, refocus on the actual work, which I think it's important. Okay, Seth, I can talk to you forever. What is the takeaway for you today? If you had to say anything to professionals that are having a hard time communicating in an environment and are trying for their message to land, what would be the one takeaway you have for
Well, I think you know what I'm going to say. I mean, we've talked about this a few times today. We've talked about, think about that other person. If you're having a hard time with the message landing, think about how you can adjust. Don't assume that it's them. Think about yourself and how you can make some adjustments toward that other person. If you're having an issue with maybe your message with your manager or with a coworker isn't landing, think about what it is about them that's maybe making that difficult. That audience that you're speaking to, that audience of one in this case, what is it that's maybe making it difficult? Maybe they have had a especially stressful week, and
them?
you're bringing them this message on a Friday afternoon, like we talked about, and then you leave it and you're like, why did they not understand? Well, maybe they've had a lot of other things that have piled up. So it's thinking a little bit about, all right, how could I time this better? Or maybe reapproach this next week when we get back to work to say, hey, this is really still bothering me, and I really want to talk through this. So I think it's thinking about that other person as much as possible, and thinking about how can I make some adjustments in the way that I communicate, or the message that I'm trying to send, so that it hopefully lands as best as possible. You can't control every aspect of them. Absolutely not. I'm not suggesting that. But what you can control is thinking through some of what you know of that other individual, and what's going on situationally, environmentally, and based on your past interactions with them. So I think ultimately it's that audience-centered approach, being focused on the audience, whether it is an audience of one to an audience of many. I think that's ultimately the communication takeaway.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, Seth, this has been great, and I am so excited about our next one because this won't be the last.
Perfect.
But I appreciate your insights. I know everyone that's listening in will appreciate them too. And to everyone, thank you for joining Coffee and Coaching. Excited